Okay, so like Sister Grace said, our topic that has been given to us by Father Raphael is the book by Frank Sheed. Okay, did you guys already answer Sister Grace's question? Like, who read it? Who actually like read a chapter? One chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, the whole book. Right, way to go, Father Brian. Okay. Since you had the last section. Okay, Frank Sheed. Well, okay, I'm going to start with a story that might give us a little bit of light of how we can apply this to our lives. So one day there was a professor, and he was teaching a bunch of like entrepreneurs about like time management, right? So they came and they called him this professor. This is from the book from Cardinal Seta, God or Nothing. And he put like this huge tank on the table. Imagine if I did that right here. Put this huge tank on a table that could hold maybe like 7 or 10 gallons. And he said he took a dozen like tennis balls, like size rocks, and he started to fill the tank with those tennis ball size rocks. And he started to fill it little by little, about like a dozen rocks. And he filled it and he asked the students, "Is the tank full?" And what do you think they said? Yes. They said yes. And he's like, "Really?" And they were like, not sure, right? And then he kept going and he took out like a bunch of gravel. And so he started to pour the gravel inside the tank, right? And then he asked the students, "Is the tank full now?" The gravel started to like, fall between the rocks. And the students were like, "No." He's like, "Yes, you're right. It's not full." And then he started to take sand, and he poured in the sand, and it started to filter in between the rocks and the gravel. And it started to fill up more and more, filling in the cracks between the rocks. And then the students started to get it. He said, "Is it full?" And they said, "No," right? And then he took water, and he started to fill up the tank, and he filled the water to the brim of the tank. And that's when it was actually full to its capacity. Right? And he said, "What am I trying to teach you with this?" And the students said that we can always fit more stuff in our schedule if we control our time management. And he said, "No." He said, "No, if you don't put the big rocks in the tank in the beginning, right? If he hadn't put in those 12 tennis ball sized rocks into the tank, would I have been able to put those in at the very end?" I'm like, "No." Right? And I think this is a good image because it's like for us to reflect on our personal lives, to ask like, what are those big rocks? Those fundamental things that are like, who am I? Like, what am I here for? Who is God? As St. Augustine said, "Who are you, God? Who are you and who am I? And what am I made for? Why am I here? What is my purpose in life?" And these are questions that maybe you've asked yourself, and maybe when you were, I didn't ask myself those questions until I was like in college, right? But those are fundamental questions that you have to ask yourself. And even if you know the answer, you're like, "Oh, I'm here to know, love, and serve God." Like so easily, we can just kind of like with the world, just forget our purpose. And we live on a very like horizontal, like we just live here, like they has abajo. No, we just live like looking like here and not raising our gaze to heaven and what we're made for. And it's so easy for that like smoke from the world to just like get into our clothes and like we just smell like smoke, right? So those fundamental questions I wanted us to like hear in this time and in this Holy Week you can re-ask yourselves those questions. Maybe you already have and you think you know the answer, but it's important to just step aside. And that's what we're doing here in Holy Week, and just take a step back from your life and to ask those questions. Lord, who am I? If you get like distracted at some moment, or you're just like, I don't know, that can be the question on your heart, like, who am I, Lord? And who are you? And what did you make me for? And what is my purpose in life, right? Just to kind of like refocus things on that. So Father Luke mentioned, Father Luke the Massey, when he gave the talk for Holy Week, when COVID was happening, right? It's like, it seems like a vivid dream. It's like, a very long last dream, whatever. It's like, I don't want to think about that, sister. But like when we had our talks online and Father Luke gave a talk, he said it was like this whole COVID thing that was happening, he said, it's like God's alarm clock was going off, right? And we're just like hitting the snooze button, right? And we're just like, we're just like indifferent. We're just like going back to sleep. Well, I feel like it's still happening. Like maybe since COVID like passed, I think God's alarm clock is still going off. And with everything that's going on in society today, and I don't have to tell you, like you guys know probably more than me, right? Sister was saying like a lot of times our news like what's the word? Like our newscast is like intentions in the mass, or like when people are praying the rosary because they're like for this or whatever, and we're like there's a shooting where what like so you guys know more than us, right? But like all the insanity that is out there in society, right? And with that, it's a call to us. Everything that happens, like we're in this world, in this society now, and it's not arbitrary. It's not at random that you were born in this time. In this time. We know our priest, his name is Father, he's passed away now, his Father Rojas, and he said that the saints of this century are called to be like huge oak trees. Like the biggest saints, like, I mean, there's a lot of like santatos, there's a lot of saints that have been in the history of the church, like huge saints, right? St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena, St. John of the Cross, just to name a few. But he said that the saints of this time that we're living now, because society is so insane, right? Not seeing the truth, not seeing things correctly. Things are being questioned that have never been questioned before, like the nature of man. And like people don't even want to be man anymore, right? And like God made man good, but people don't even want that, right? So it's like, this is insane, right? You just drive down the road, or you just like a lot of times people are probably just like possessed and you don't even realize it, right? So it's just like, so in this time, like you're like, man, why am I alive in this time? But he's calling you to be a great saint. And so this is providential that you're here in this time because especially like also you young people, like he's calling you to be a saint, right? And even more so with all of the setbacks and all of the circumstances that we're living in. It's no excuse to be mediocre. It's no excuse just be like, wow, I lived like, like everyone thought this, so no big deal. I can just kind of lower my standards on holiness. No, you have to like, it's even more so that the Lord is demanding of us. So briefly, I'm going to break it down. The whole book, Society and Sanity, okay, by Frank J. Sheed. I call him Frankie J. Sheed. I heard more than one of you guys say, he's a prophet. And I was like, yeah, he really is, because this book was published in 1953. But it's as current and relative as could be. Like it's like he knew our times, right? And everything that's going on with communism. But he's one of the greatest apologists ever in the church. And his other book, which I really love, is Theology and Sanity. And it talks more about man's relationship with God. But this book deals more with man's relationship with man. So maybe as I'm talking, you're like, sister, like, what about God? And yeah, obviously I'm going to mention God. But I mean, there's a lot of things that are probably obvious that I'm like, that's not our focus here. Okay. Right. And why is this important for us? Because this is like a compass for, many of you have like worries, you have families, you have your children, your spouse, and your responsibility to get them to heaven. And there's a lot of questions. Like I look at you guys and I'm like, I don't know what I would do, like if I were you, like, honestly. But like having the truth is a compass, right? If you know what your north is, it's like, that's what I'm made for. Like, I know who I am. I know like what I'm made of, and I know what God has given me, and I know what it's for. Then I can use those tools. It's like he's given us weapons, and here we're going to learn how to use them, right? If you don't know how to use them, then you're just going to, it's without purpose. Okay, so it's like the multiplication table to be able to do math, right? It helps us enormously. So to like have these clear principles to apply them to your situation, okay? All right, so well, I guess like I said, like have you guys ever been to like one of those like sketchy fairs? I'm from Texas, so like every year like there's that fair. I don't know if you guys, people up north also, I don't know. Like there's that sketchy fair, so you're like, Mom, let's go to the fair, come on. And it's like the summertime. But then there's always like that mirror house. You know, what's it called? Like a fun house? They even call it like a fun house. And when I was little, I was like, I'm not going in there. Like, but like my friends wanted to go, so I was like, okay, fine, I'll go. But like it's like this maze, and it has like mirrors everywhere, and they're like distorted, right? And that's a picture of society today. You're going through that like mirror maze, you know what I'm talking about, right? And like you like look at someone else, and then you like look at yourself, and it's like all distorted, right? And then like there's like that app on like your computer, your phone that can like distort your face or whatever. And like I don't know, some people get a kick out of it. I'm just always like, whatever, okay. But like, but that's society today because man is distorted, right? So my section, we're gonna break it down. Okay, so here we go. To see things as they are, right? So sanity is to see things as they are, right? When somebody is insane, they're not seeing things as they are, right? They're not seeing things clearly. It's deformed, right? Like when someone's insane, they like hallucinate. They see things that aren't there, right? And so that's our society is insane. They're not seeing things as they are. I forgot what time we're supposed to end, but 3:10. Okay, let's keep going. So, all right, point 1, okay, that I'm going to talk about is what is man? So if you're like schematical, I don't know why I'm like all of a sudden like thinking in Spanish. If you're like, you want to write this down, point 1 I'm going to talk about is what is man? And I mean mankind. I mean the human person, right? Not just like a man. Like, you know what I'm saying, right? Okay. All right. So anyone who supports like contraception, same-sex marriage, gender ideology, euthanasia, they don't know what man is, right? They don't know and they don't care, right? Or they treat man as an animal to do as they wish. Okay, number 2, what I'm going to talk about is based off of that truth, how should I treat man? So we got the foundation, and how should I treat man? So we could think about this in 2 spheres, I guess. Obviously society, right? Because we make up society. Man is made of society. It's like what Frank Sheed says, we're the raw material of it, right? So if we want to build a good society, we have to know who man is and what he's for, right? People who make bridges and they're engineers, they study steel, right? And they have to study it, right? That material. So those of us who are building society, and you're part of the society, right? Like in Lord of the Rings, I don't know if you remember that scene with the Ents, like the trees that are like moving, I don't know, like, and like what's his name? Like the 2, Merry and Pippin, the hobbits, and there's like this huge battle going on, and like everything like this, it's like the fine line, it's like, we're down to the moment, and they're like, we're just not gonna do anything, like we're neutral. Like, and Pippin's like, you're part of this world, right? Like you can't be neutral, right? So you're the raw material of the society, you make up the society, so you can't remain indifferent, right? And I think that's the problem with society of the good, the people, los buenos, right? The good who get tired, right? El cansancio de los buenos, no? We can't get tired, we cannot bajar los brazos. I'm so glad the majority of you out there are Spanish speaking. You cannot like throw in the towel or get tired. It's so easy. It's so easy. And I know from experience, right? We're all in the same game together. Don't get tired. Keep going with the love of Christ. Okay. So what is man? And based off that, how should I treat man? So on a level of society, but then don't forget you have inside the walls of your house, you have your little society, right? You have your little family. It's like, what does this matter? Little me. I'm just a mom. I got my kids, right? I really don't think about these political things, right? Well, no. Like, if you start to live it in the walls of your house, with your family, then that you're forming your children, right? And they're the future of society. So yeah, this has everything to do with you, right? Point 3, like I said, God has put you where you're at. today in society, and he's also put you in your family. Like, none of us really like had a say so with God. Like, hey, can you put me like with this family and like in that state and in this time? That'd be great. No, right? He placed us exactly where we had to be so that we would grow in love, right? He knows exactly the best moment for us, the best people to be around, the best vocation for you to grow to your plenitude, which is love. Okay. No, I just don't know why I'm like looking at you the whole time. No, stay there. You're good. Manimas. Okay. Point 1. What is man? Okay, like I said. Okay, let's see. So I like a lot what, well, this is Sheed, not to be confused with Fulton Sheen, right? But 2 men that lived in that time period were like amazing, like a total clarity. But he says that, he says that every person carries within their heart, just follow me here, just go with me here, carries within his heart a blueprint of what he loves. So like, as you go living your life, you kind of form an ideal inside your heart. Like the way you think, like your habits, your experiences, your desires, like what you want. And that kind of, think back to when you're little, like what you desire now, or like kind of what forms your ideal, what you strive for, has been formed by you, first and foremost, right? Okay, you can't be like, I was born like in this family, like you form yourself, you form who you're gonna be by the decisions you've made, right? And so like if you've listened to like classical music, you grew up like that, like you have this ideal of like beauty. And when you hear like Beethoven, you're like, that's it, like that's the song. Or you hear piano and you're just like, your heart is just like, that's exactly like the melody I had in my heart and I didn't know how to express it, right? Or when you read like St. Augustine, his Confessions, right? And you're like, have you ever read like a line from like Confessions of St. Augustine? You're just like, he said that's exactly what I wanted to say, right? So like when you see that or you read it, there's something inside of you that's like, yes, like that's what I have in my heart. And you have that desire for the truth and for the good, right? And when you encounter the truth and when you hear it, it's like something inside of you just kind of like comes alive, right? Okay, so like man in society, a lot of them go through life without ever meeting what they call their ideal. Like a lot of men, like a lot of people are just frustrated out there because they're disappointed because they've set their heart on something that cannot fill them. And Fulton Sheen says the absolute love of every human heart does exist, and it is God. Okay? But he says, so too, God also has within himself the blueprints of everything in the universe. Right? So every like tree, every flower, every bird, like everything in creation has already pre-existed in the mind of God. Like you could just walk around, like when there's moments of like free time and you're just like walking around and checking out the Spanish moss blowing in the wind, it's like, wow, like that's pretty cool. Like everything already pre-existed. He already imagined it. He already had it in his mind before the beginning of the world. Right? And that created thing is truly what it's supposed to be. The more it identifies with that pre-existing idea in the mind of God. Okay, so like trees and birds and sunsets, they just are what they are and they glorify God. But with us, it's not so, right? I mean, part of it just that we're existing, yes, like we do give glory to God. But God has 2 pictures of us, right? One is what we are, right? And the other one is what we ought to be, like what he's calling us to be. So he has, in one instant that he looks at us, he has the model and the reality. He has the blueprint and he sees the building, what's really there, right? The sheet music and the melody, right? So there's one thing like where it like exists in his mind, but then what we really are. And why is it like that? Because we have free will, right? We're not like the We're not like the bird or the rose or the, right? But we can do things to make those two images, like what we really are and what God has called us to be. And that's what our life is, to strive to make sure those two images become one, right? Where what we are becomes that image that he had of us in his mind before the beginning of the world that he's called us to. And that's what it means to be a saint, right? To be what God has called you to be, right? And that's what the saints did. Like little by little, they, or at the pace of a giant, like, it's like each one, but with their free will, they went conforming themselves to the will of God, living the virtues. Like when you see, you don't express it this way, but like when you're walking around out there and you see like this big, beautiful oak tree, I mean, there's a lot of them out here, but sometimes there's like oak trees and then there's like oak trees, right? Like you see one and you're like, whoa, like that is a really beautiful oak tree. Have you guys ever been like, it's good to be amazed by like creation, right? Because if you've lost that element, then something in you has like died, right? It's good to see these things and just to like be amazed at God's creation. Or you see like a golden retriever like running on the beach and you're like, wow, like that's really stupid, but it's like, or you see like when we went to Kelly Iznaga's like farm and there's like this one horse, I don't remember the horse's name, but we took the girls horseback riding. You guys remember that? Yeah. And there's like this one horse that's like, I don't know, there's just like, it's a horse. Like that's a horse. You look at that horse and you're like, that is a horse. Like that is giving glory to God right there. Okay, because it is what it's supposed to be, right? It's like striving for, it doesn't know how to do anything though. It's like, God made me this way, right? But like, it's kind of nice. But we do, right? And it's good. You don't say like, check out that tree, it's a good tree, right? But inside of you, you recognize that it is good. Why? Because it is striving for its for its end. Okay. Okay. But that's where I wanted to like little parentheses, like the importance of like that's why we're here, of prayer life. And I know we always talk about it, but I will never get tired of saying it. Like the importance, you will never like reach your final purpose, your goal, to be a saint, if you like do not return every single day to that intimate conversation with God. And I know that we say it all the time, but it's like without prayer, like your soul will suffocate. Impossible to be a saint. Imposible, right? So you need that daily contact with God, right? And it could be something that you think like, oh, I've been going for, I've been praying every day for like a week. Like I'm on another level now. No, that's not what it is. No, it's you have to, that's something that's like for life. So every single day, carve out that time, like 30 minutes, an hour, where you have that intimate conversation with God. Okay. And striving in the virtues, right? When you see somebody that's good and they like radiate goodness, it's the same thing. When you see that oak tree, you're like, that's a good oak tree, right? When you see a person that's good, you're like, wow. Like Valeria, like one of the girls that died in the earthquake with Sister Claire, they would say, she's just so good. She's just so good. Like I want to be with her. Like she's just good. And that's what it is. Like she was striving for her plenitude, to be a saint. She was striving for that union with God. Okay. So she says, like, I'm only going to focus on one, but he says, like, what is man, right? Man is made in the image of God, like it says in Genesis, right? And we have to ask, well, like, what is the truth about God, right? He is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving. And man has a measure of these three elements, right? So we reflect him in that sense. We have an intellect and a will, okay? Hang on there. I know you guys are struggling. Okay, so you have an intellect and a will, right? So just like everything has a purpose, right? Like a pencil, right? This pencil, right? Has a purpose. What's its purpose? Yeah, say it nice and loud. To write, yes. Okay, because it wakes you up too. That's good. Okay, so the pencil, its purpose is to write, right? And it's fulfilling its duty, right? It's fulfilling its purpose. But if I take this pencil and I try to open a can of SpaghettiOs, is it going to work? No, like I'm either gonna break myself, I'm gonna break the can or break the pencil. I'm not gonna break the can. I'm gonna break the pencil, or I'm gonna hurt myself, right? So everything that exists on the planet has a purpose, right? And when it's striving for its purpose, it is good, right? Um, and so too with our faculties, we have an intellect. So what is our intellect? It's to know, but not just like, oh, I gotta know everything. No, it's to know the truth. The truth. So that's the object of the intellect, is to know the truth. And the will, right? The object of intellect is to see the truth and to know it, right? And the will is to choose the good, right? So they complement each other. Right? The intellect kind of like sheds light on what is there, and the will can choose it. So it's like, imagine if you're like in a valley and it's dark, right? And you're walking through the valley, and but you can't see like this boulder or this like cliff or this tree, or you can't see those things. You can't perceive it in its reality. But when there's light, right? When you see things as they are in their reality, then you can see what it is, right? Especially if you're illuminated by faith, right? That the Lord gives us. Okay. So but what is this reality of man? She says it's also we have the intellect and the will, and they have their purpose. So we can ask ourselves, well, do I like my thoughts? What are my thoughts? Do I use my thoughts for its purpose to know the truth? Or am I just like thinking about superficial things, right? Or am I just kind of like feeding on what the world gives me, or like on my phone all the time, or watching the news? Because like those things like come into us, and they little by little they form like our thoughts, right? And then you end up like desiring those things. So that's why it's good. You have to be very vigilant of like what you see and what you watch and what you put into your head, because later your will automatically will just like start to like grab onto that. Okay. So we are also, little parentheses, we have the effects of original sin, okay, which is concupiscence. Okay? So even though we see something and we know what we should do, it's hard for us, we see the good that we should do, like St. Paul said, but we do the evil that we don't want to do, right? And how many times we know that from experience, right? You start off the day and you're like, okay, I'm getting in my prayer time, good, and then like by noon it's like, what happened? Like, right? So it's like you mess up, and it's like, yeah, but we're weak, right? You see that the will, you see like how we're damaged in that sense. Okay, we all know that. I don't have to go into that, right? All right. So how you guys doing? Good. Okay, thanks. All right. What time am I finishing again? Sorry. 3:10. Can you just give me like a 5-minute warning? It's not that I'm like excited to finish, but I just. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Wow. The truth about freedom. So he talks a little bit about. He says, well, he gives 3 definitions of freedom. 2 of them are false, and 1 of them are true. Right? The first one, you can take notes of this, right? Freedom is the right to do whatever I please. Okay. And we've all heard that before, right? Of course, like we're free to do what we please, like without coercion, is that the word? Without being forced to do anything. Like, we can turn a machine gun on our neighbor's chickens, right? We can drive the car on the sidewalk. We can, I don't know, we can do all sorts of things, right? And like when you're young, like when you're in high school, sometimes you're just like, people are like, why are you doing that? So, because I can, right? Because you're, as a young person, right? This is good for moms and dads, right? Because there's a moment when your kid is like testing out they're like, oh, like, because it's a gift, right? And they're like kind of test driving their freedom, right? And they're just like, they want to do something bad, like, hey, I'm gonna throw this pencil at you, because they can, right? So but we have to teach them, like, should you do that? Like, ought you to do that, right? Because freedom is not just doing whatever you please, as the world tells us, right? So today in society, it's obvious there's like, they live and breathe this false idea of freedom. And man is getting like what you call like a spiritual stomachache, because everyone's just eating cake every day, right? I mean, cake is good, right? But if you eat it like for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which, I mean, like, you're going to get sick, right? So you have like a spiritual stomach ache, which is what is going on in the world today. Okay, so like a quick snapshot of that. Divorce rates in countries like the US is astronomical. The birth rate is very low. Millions of couples are simply cohabitating without any marriage vows. Contraception is reduced to mere science. Infidelity has become a fine art. Fornication is no longer considered a sin. Sex before marriage is encouraged in sex education programs, indoctrinating young people in our schools. Homosexuality, abortion, etc., blah, 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 blah. Okay? So this is the world that we live in. Like, man wants to be woman wants to be man, and it's all whack. Okay? So as I'm listening to these things, because I know that, like, when I first met the Home of the Mother, like, and I didn't even realize this until I met the Home of the Mother, but, like, you just kind of grow up, and, like, every movie you watch, there's, like, somebody divorced. Like, now it's a whole nother, now it's, like, well, it's, like, homosexuality and then worse stuff, right? But, like, when I was growing up, it was just, like, the movies, you know, I'm not going to mention them, but just, like, it's, like, cool to be divorced, right? Like, there's movies that make it seem really normal, and it works out, right? It's, like, and they look happy, and they're cool, and they're fun, right? But, like, no, I was going with that, sorry. Oh, yeah, so, like, as I'm saying these things, like, a good examination of your intellect, because, like I said, like, it all just, like, we're living and breathing this. So, like, don't be, like, surprised or, like, scandalized by yourself if it's, like, as I was reading those things, like, you know, you could be like, but divorce, it's really not that big of a deal, sister. Like they don't love each other. Like, what the heck? Like, it's okay, right? Because, like, that happened to me when I first met the Home. Like, there were some things that, like, I remember Father Raphael was saying, like, this. I'm like, really? Like, it's too intense, right? And so as you, like, we need to purify ourselves of those false mentalities from the world and see, is there something in me that's kind of been, like, permeating my soul, and that's kind of informing my conscience, where I'm like, oh, it's really not that big of a deal. Like homosexuality or things like that, like little by little, they can easily seep in. So be careful. Okay, so that was the first one. The first definition of freedom, which is false, is the freedom to do whatever I please, the right to do whatever I please, right? And also, just a side note on that, like, the world is so, like, seductive with the media, right? Like they say something once, right? The quote, I don't remember who said it, but if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Like, you tell it once, it's like a myth. You tell it twice, right? You tell it 3 times, it's like, everyone's like, yeah, that's the truth, right? I mean, just look at, like, what am I saying? So we have to have clarity as Christians, like Catholics, and we receive that clarity from the Word of God, right? We have to be, like, wash our brains. Like Father Raphael always says, like you always have to compare your thoughts, your desires, your habits, like what goes through your mind. Okay, pasa por la cabeza. You always have to, like, compare it with the gospel of Christ, and that's why it's so important to pray every day with the gospel, right? To meditate on it, to, you know, like compare, like, this feeling that I have, or this sentiment that I have, like, where I'm not forgiving someone, like, is that Christian? Like, should I really be doing that? And you read the gospel and what he says, and it's like, no, so cut it out, right? So that's way, like, we can form our intellect and move our will to choose what Christ teaches us. It's very important. Okay, the second definition of freedom is the right to do what you must. So it's kind of like, touch on this briefly, like, okay, so that sounds right? No? But this is totalitarian freedom, right? Which was developed in order to destroy individual freedom for the sake of society, right? It's the, I can't say that word right now, I don't know why. Totalitarian freedom, which was developed in order to destroy individual freedom for the sake of society. So that's, I mean, you guys can talk about this in your group discussions, right? Is that happening right now? Yeah, right? I could give examples, but I'll just let you chew on that. Like communism, I mean, that's all kind of, like, coming back, okay, in different ways today. Okay, the third one is the freedom. Freedom is the right to do whatever we ought. Okay? This ought implies a goal, a purpose, right? Like, I'm free to draw a triangle if I give it 3 sides, right? I'm free to fly if I obey the laws of gravity and aeronautics, right? I'm free to choose, but I'm not free from the consequences that then pose on me of the physical laws, right? I can eat Dunkin' Donuts every day for every meal, but that's going to have its consequences, right? And so this freedom, a lot of times, like, the Lord tells us how to find our freedom, right? Through he like lays down the law. He gives us the 10 commandments, which can seem like a bunch of no's, even as adults. Like, you can be like, it's just like, don't, like, you shall not do this, do this, do this, and you're like, can't do anything, right? But it's important to realize that the 10 commandments come from love, right? And he's given them out of love, and they're based on love. Like, you remember, like, when you're a kid, right? You're like coming out of the pool, and you're running, and the lifeguard's like, don't run, right? Why? Because you're gonna fall, right? So you get in trouble, right? It's to protect us, right? It's based off of the dignity of the human person. Or when I was little, when I was little, I was like a baby or a toddler. But we went camping, right? You're like, what kind of family takes their baby camping? Well, we went camping in Arkansas, right? And there was a moment where my mom had me, like, she told me this story, and like, she set me down for 2 seconds, and I was at the age where you just go, right? You're starting to learn to walk, and your like little chubby legs are going, and you just go, right? And so she set me down, and there was like the fire going there with the s'mores. The cousins were there, the other families were there. And I see the fire in my little baby mind, and I'm just like, ooh, I want to touch the fire, right? It's like beautiful, it glows, right? And my mom got distracted for like 2 seconds, and I was like, at that point, it was like slow motion. I was like, touch the fire, right? And all of a sudden, like, my mom, like, her motherly instinct, like the moms have the eyes in the back of their head, right? And sisters, no. And they turn around, and they're like, and she's like, she gets up, and she's like, Mama Bear, and she's like, no, don't touch the fire. She like grabs me, and I'm like, and I'm like crying and everything, and I'm like, and she has to be like, you could be like, whoa, lighten up, lady, like, but like, but she had to, teach me, right? She could just let me be like, oh, like, let's see our kid watch the fire, like, they gotta like experience their freedom, they gotta like exercise their freedom. No, like, she had to be firm, and she had to like, with a lot of violence, right? In a good sense, right? I don't know if I got hit afterwards, I'm not sure. Probably should have gotten hit more. But anyways, but like that, you see, like, why did she have to say the N-O word that we don't like to hear so many times, right? When you're little, or even when you're an adult, right? Like the rules we have in Holy Week are like, do this, do that. It's for a reason, right? But it's because of love, right? She didn't want me to get hurt, and she loves me, and that's clear. You guys recognize that as parents, right? And so the same thing with the 10 Commandments. To reach our plenitude, first and foremost, he gives us our mission in the 10 Commandments. Like, how am I going to be happy, right? Just follow directions, right? Like that Catholic stuff video that you guys made with like the blender. It doesn't even have any, I think it's like the New Age one, but it has the blender, and like Luis is like, he's going to make mayonnaise, right? Which is like a Spanish thing that you do. You make mayonnaise, right? And then Pablo's like, don't put anything weird inside. And he's like, okay. And so he's making his mayonnaise, the eggs, other stuff. I don't remember the oil, all that jazz. And all of a sudden he like sees like this chocolate bar, and he's like, oh, I can put this in. Right? He like puts it in, and then he just starts to go wild. He puts in like socks and like barbecue sauce and like ketchup, and he's like, he turns on the blender and he drinks it, and then he's like throwing up in the bathroom, right? So it's like the 10 Commandments. Like, don't put anything weird. Like, just don't do weird stuff. Just follow the 10 Commandments, right? As a basis, right? Okay? But then, obviously, you got to keep listening to the voice of God and give him what he's asking of you, right? Like, if he wants to give something up, like, there could be something good. Like I said, with your intelligence, you see something good. This is good. And it is. Something can be good, inherently good, right? But just because it's good, and maybe it's good for someone else, doesn't mean it's good for you. So that's why it's so important to have that relationship with the Lord, to see like, what is, I'm going too fast, I'm sorry. What do you want to slow down? Oh, okay. So what is good for me? Like, what is good for my family? Right? And sorry, we're trying to like work out the kinks of this. I'm not sure if you're getting it, but like, what is man and what is man made for? I'm just giving you the principles so you can like discern that for your family, because you each have your own situations. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna pinpoint. She talks about, if you didn't actually read it like all the way, well, I didn't read all the way either, but I read my part. Okay, there you go. Just say it. Took me like 2 weeks. I didn't do anything else. Just locked myself in a room and I read. No, but if you, it's really good, and I can't abark everything in this book. But he does mention ways that man and his intellect and his will is violated, right? And there's so many, and I can't go through all of them, but I wanted to pinpoint one, and I call it the responsibility shake-off. You like that? You can put that in your notes if you're like responsibility shake-off, right? And okay, so get this, right? And it's in Catholic circles. Like sometimes we get invited, like people are finding out about Sister Claire, and they're like, sisters, oh my gosh, like Sister Claire, sister, can you come talk at our youth group or at our university or whatever, or the Catholic group or whatever? And we're like, yeah, we'll come. Okay, we'll show the movie and then we'll do Q&A afterwards. But anyway, sometimes just like amongst like Catholic circles and Catholic groups, we just find like this a violation of the will. It's kind of like slithered in there a little bit. So we forget that we have a free will, right? And yes, with our free will, a lot of bad stuff happens. That's true, right? A lot of times we choose what we do not want to do. It's true, right? And we just kind of get like comfortable in that false use of our freedom. So we sin, right? We sin, and we fall into that. We fall into maybe vices, but we say like, oh, that's just the way I am. I'm broken. Have you heard that before? Like, okay. I think maybe Sister Anna talked about this last Holy Week, and you might mention something. But that's a big danger, and that can filter in. Like, I didn't even realize that till like one of the sisters mentioned it. I was just like, oh, wow, that's true. Like there's an obsession in a lot of Catholic circles there's an obsession with like brokenness. And yes, it's got truth, an element of truth to it, because yes, we are damaged by original sin, but we're not bound by that. Like, I think that's very, from Jansenism, could that be, Father Peter? I don't know if that's like a mentality that's like, we're so broken, like Lutheranism, I guess, like we're so broken that we can't choose the good. I don't know. And then like, what's the only solution? Well, gotta get saved, right? And that's it. I'm home free. I just got saved, right? So that's like Protestantism, a lot of that. But it's all like based on like, oh, my past and what they've done to me, and like an obsession with like, this is the way I am. Like I'm broken, so I can't, right? I don't know if you've encountered that like out there. But that is like, the heart of that is a violation, because you're just saying like, I can't change. I can't change, right? Which is silly. Because it's like, in a sense, denying that man has a free will, that you're bound and you can't change. So we use it as an excuse, right? The golfer, you like to golf. Like when you miss a hole, you blame it on your golf clubs. You're like, man, that's my golf, that's not my good club, right? Or the kid that broke the vase. And the classic example, like no one's in the room, right? And then like the sister's like way over there, and the kid's like, she pushed me, right? Okay, so it's like we can't accept, we're like, I'm damaged, I can't do anything, like I can't change, right? And what's on top of that? God accepts me how I am, so I'm hunky-dory, right? Right? So, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. Okay, so we often use concupiscence as an excuse, right? But you are still free to choose the good, and God has given us this capacity to choose the good, right? And it's also like, I don't know, what's the problem with this mentality? Number one, you're doubting God's grace. You're doubting God's grace. Right? Well, first he's given you this capacity, but also it's not just like he leaves us hanging. Like we have our free will, but he also gives us his grace. I mean, we can't do it without him, but we have to do our part and be aided by his grace, right? And so he wants to restore us, right? That's why we're here in Holy Week to receive the graces from from Christ's redemptive act on the cross, so that we can change. So in this Holy Week encounter, just kind of like a springboard, like don't be afraid to put yourself before the Lord and see like, what do I have to change? Because it's not just here to come, right? And like you go through Holy Week, but Holy Week doesn't go through you, right? It's to like really be sincere with the Lord and say like, do I really trust you that you're going to give me the grace? And how is he going to give you the grace? Through the sacraments, right? I mean, like, Father Peter and Father Brian are here for confessions, and like we're receiving the Eucharist every day. All this stuff, like all these opportunities to grow in virtues. So like take advantage of it. And also it can be in el fondo, in the, like behind it all, I guess, like a hidden laziness, right? Because like you're like, I can't change, like why am I going to try, right? Okay, so that's a good question to ask yourself, right? God who created you without you will not save you without you, said St. Augustine. So he created without you, but he needs your yes, and he respects your freedom, and he loves you so much that he wants you to choose him, right? To seek him. Okay. How's it going? Okay, and also, sorry, I'm just hanging there, guys. All right, so also, this Holy Week, right, he's going to give you probably, the cross, right? And I remember Father Henry, one Holy Week, he said, like, don't run away from the cross. Don't run away from the cross. Like, if he's giving you the cross this Holy Week, whether it be through, like, tiredness, or you didn't sleep well, or all that stuff, like, this whole Lent, you've been, like, I mean, hopefully, you've been, like, pumping it up. You're just like, yeah, I'm going to do this. But, like, that doesn't make sense to do all that. Like, those things that you're doing, if, like, you don't accept those moments where he permits you to live the cross, right? I mean, like, we sing songs about it and stuff like that. We sing songs about it, but, like, when it really comes down to that moment, it's like rejoice in the cross. And, like, you try to live it as best you can, right? But, and, like, our Lord, right, just don't run away from the cross. I think that's, like, a very, like, specific, that's key to the Holy Week, because you could come here, but, like, obviously at our Holy Week encounters, we're not, like, in 5-star hotels, and, like, like, there's plenty of opportunities for sacrifice, like, plenty of opportunities to grow in charity, right? So, like, go for it. Okay. All right. It's 3:02. How are we doing? Everyone's there? Everyone's alive? All right, good. Smiles, good. I see smiles. We'll end with a smile. Okay. All right. Okay, so we also, like, seems like I'm getting off topic, but I also wanted to, like, mention, throw back to, like, how your family is a society, right? That mistake, that responsibility shake-off thing that I was telling you about, that we can live in our own spiritual life, you can also do it with your kids. Okay, so that's what's scary, right? Because you have the responsibility to get them to heaven, and we're kind of like, we've got the world around us and all that jazz, right? So we have to be aware of this, to not lower the bar of holiness with your family. So, like, connect the dots, right? What is man, right? He's called to go to heaven, right? For happiness, eternal happiness in heaven, the way, the truth, and the life, right? And like, with that foundation, don't lower the bar for your children, right? Like, we need saints. Like Father Felix said, that one Holy Week before Sister Claire died, he said, the home of the mother will be doing its job, or something like that, I don't remember how he said it, will be like fulfilling its duty when the home of the mother produces saints for the church. And that's what we're here for. So you have your little society and your little school of love inside your home. We can't lower the bar. And that just boils down to little things, like just teaching your child how to act in public, right? Because maybe also, like, I'm not, I guess sometimes it's easy. I'm not trying to, like, hate on, like, homeschooling, but, like, sometimes it's easier, like, when you're living in your own home, like, to, like, your kids know how to live a certain way because that's the environment that they live in. but it's like sometimes they miss opportunities to have other encounters with like other circumstances that challenge them in their behavior. And like there's different like ways to act in different places. So like just like encourage them to like have like self-control in that sense, like, or even like, in the mass, like it just, we get used to doing certain things because it's like it becomes okay, but like just try to help your kids to like practice that self-control, because it's possible. Like it's possible for them, I'm like, just do what you can. I know it's hard. Okay.
Say it.
There you go. Okay. Okay, so the importance of having a demanding spirit with their children, right? And this is something that Father Raphael has also taught us in how we run our summer camps, right? And like maybe your kid doesn't want to come to summer camp, and maybe he's not ready, right? But like our summer camps are hard, okay? But he's taught us that we have to have this demanding spirit in summer camp, and this also applies to your family life, right? So we try to teach the girls and the brothers teach the guys virtues. Right? Part of like the goal of the summer camp is to have an encounter with our Lord Jesus Christ and our Blessed Mother, and it's beautiful. Like I can tell you, when we start off a summer camp, day one, right? It's just like, like they're kind of bratty, I'm not gonna lie. But I'm not talking about your kids. I don't know who I'm talking about. But anyways, don't be offended. I was a brat too. I am a brat. Okay, but like you see the transformation in those 7 days, and by the end, because they're going to mass, they're going to adoration, they're having a real encounter with our Lord Jesus Christ and our Blessed Mother. But then part of that encounter is that denial of self that they're living. Because it's hot, like we're in the forest and in Florida, like there's mosquitoes, there's bugs, things like that. So I mean it's hard, and they're used to like AC all the time and like having their fuzzy pillows and like 10 pillows and their bedspread, but like, so like this is good, like this is really good for the kids. And by the end of those 7 days, you see that transformation in their face. Because why? Exactly what she was talking about. They're living to like the full capacity. Their intellect and their will is totally like just like turned from their self to God, right? To their final end. And you like when you see that beautiful rose and it's just got like, it's like iridescent and it's like it smells good, right? And you're like, whoa, that's a nice rose, right? When you see that kid, you're like, yes, that's it. Like they're on the way to holiness. Like they're not, like they're on their way though. They know like what they have to do, and if they fall, like they know how to get up. Like they know their dominant defect, and that's what you have to help your kids do. And you guys have to live it too. First and foremost, like help the kid, help your child to know how to fight against their dominant defect, right? With lots of patience. So there's like 3 stages that we try to teach. Well, there's to like have the ideal education, right? To the kid is motivated, doing things required of them, motivated by a reward or fear of punishment. The second stage, doing things required of you to fulfill your duty to God and others. And the third is to do things required of you out of love of God, in order to achieve the purpose for which man was created, to praise, revere, and serve him for his glory and the salvation of souls. And that's something that we try to do, that you guys can do in your homes. Like maybe, yes, sometimes you'll have to give a little like premium, like a reward. Yeah, thank you. But then little by little, like explaining it to them, like, no, we're doing this out of love for God, right? Because like we're storing up treasures for ourselves in heaven. Because the world doesn't tell you that. The world says like, yeah, you did a great job. Like, it's all about you. But like give them that supernatural view to raise their gaze to heaven. Okay. Okay. All right. So also as your little society, you have to have 2 things. This is actually not from Frankie Sheed, but from Thomas Morales, who wrote the book The Forge of Men. So let's start with that. Okay, so he says we must be able to recognize reality and the hierarchy of values that exists in the world around us, right? So like, what is man? Right? We must recognize the purpose of our beings. and know how to give important to what's important, right? So the kids are watching you, right? If you're like, there and you're like, you're doing something, you're like cooking or whatever, right? And your kid's trying to talk to you, right? And then like the phone, like you get a text and your kid's talking to you, right? But if you like leave everything aside and you're just like stop listening to your kid, you're like, the phone, right? And it's like work or whatever or something, it's like a business call, and you just kind of leave everything aside for that phone, right? You're like showing your kids with your actions like what's important, right? Or if you're like watching TV, like the dads, like all you want to do is just come home and just watch TV, right? That's like your thing. I got somebody there, right? Okay. Right? So you just, I just want to chillax. I just want to sit back, had a hard day at work, right? You're showing your kid what's important to you, yourself. Like, really? I mean, you really don't care what's on TV. It's really not about the TV. I mean, maybe you do sometimes, the game. But, like, that time you have, you can choose yourself. Or, like, if you really want to be a saint, spend time with your kid, right? They came home from school. They want to tell you stuff, right? Listen to them, right? Okay, so we must be able to recognize this scale of values, and this ideal must be clear to ourselves and to our children, right? Okay, so here's a clear example that he gives. He says, a child is entertaining himself with a rattle, right? You all got the image, right? You see this almost every day. Someone offers the dad a check of $1 million in exchange for the rattle. So imagine, you're there, right? Your kid's playing with the rattle on the floor, right? Nice rattle. You bought that at Baby Gap or something. And then somebody comes, right? Good person. Okay, so this is not an evil man. He offers you $1 million. This is a good thing, right? Okay. Okay, so what are you gonna do, right? You're like, $1 million, the rattle. You're gonna take that rattle out of your baby's hand, like, give me that, right? And you're like, here you go. It's yours, right? Okay. Even though the child is kicking and screaming, right? Your child is like freaking out. Okay. How does the dad have the strength to do it? Oh, more smiling is good. Even though even though he's provoking tears from his child, right? Especially if it's a little girl. Dads, you have like that weakness, right? You want to give your little girl whatever they want, all right? Don't do that, okay? All right, please don't do that. Okay. Okay. How does the dad have the strength to do that? Because he has a clear idea of the value of each thing. Rattle, $1 million. And he knows the worth of $1 million and a plastic toy. This clarity of principles, which the child is unable to grasp, gives the dad strength to cause the child to suffer. That's what you guys have to be strong in. This is going to give you the strength. If you have that clarity, you're like, no, example, right? I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but I'm just saying, like, the iPhone. Right? I mean, and your kid gets to be a certain age. I mean, a lot of you guys have like little ones, but like it's coming soon. They're growing up. So like they want a phone because it's like everyone else has one, right? You have to discern what God wants. Like if it's causing your child to fall into sin, right? Then like just have that clarity to be like, what's more valuable, the soul of my child or their eternal salvation? I'm not saying that you're going to go to hell if you have a cell phone. I'm just saying, like, sometimes the case is that you have to discern what's best for your children, right? It also could be a good thing for your child at a certain maturity to have a cell phone, because then they can learn self-control. You can set limits, right? So each one has to discern what their situation is, okay? Okay. But especially setting limits for your kids, right? Okay. How are we doing? So should I end at 3:15, punto? Yeah, I think so too. Okay, so just a little wrap up, which I'm so sorry. I didn't even really talk about a lot of that stuff. But this is good, I think. I think the Lord wanted you guys to hear this. So a little wrap up. Like, how do I know what to hold on to? And what do I know? Like, how do I know when I have to let something go? So this is good for you, and this is good for your family, for your little society, right? So there's sanity in your society. Like, sister, if you only knew what my house was like. Not that kind of, I mean, there's some kind of crazy that's good, but like, as long as you got your fundamentals straight. So how do I know, like, what limits I should set, or where do I go from here? let's end with St. Ignatius, right? He says, man is created, so he's giving you the purpose of man. This is like the principios, the foundation of spiritual exercises that he gives. So the first week you meditate on the purpose of man, right? Like, who am I? What am I here for? Man is created to praise, reverence, and serve God, our Lord. And by this means, to save his soul. Like, that just is like a breath of fresh air, a fresher breath air, to like the soul, right? So, like, you just walk around and just think that, like, am I doing that? Like, am I praising and reverencing and serving God, our Lord? So that's what I'm made for. And the other things on the face of the earth are created for man, that they may help him in pursuing the end for which he was created, for eternal happiness in heaven and on this earth, right? It begins now. And from this, number 2, and from this it follows that man is to use them, created things. Are you following me? You guys, should I start over? You're good. Yeah, okay. Man is to use creatures and things as much as they help him attain this end, and ought to rid them as far as they hinder you to your end. Okay, so is this thing helping me to praise, reverence, and serve our Lord? Even though it could be a good thing in itself, right? So just throwing that out there, right? Okay, so that's the rule of thumb by St. Ignatius. To desire and choose only what is most conducive for us to the end which we were created. Okay, and then I encourage you to keep reading it. He talks about the true plenitude, which I didn't get to. I'm sorry. But today is Holy Thursday, and we have a lot. Like, it's just begun. Like the NASCAR, right? It's like, start your engines. I mean, here we go. Like, this is gonna be great. Like, just, you got to start the engine. Now, only you can do that, right? But it's gonna be good because the plenitude, what Frankie Sheed, he says, is love, right? Is love. So the Lord is gonna give. On Holy Thursday, he gives us like, love one another as I have loved you, and he never commands something that's impossible. Right? So just to end with that, he's going to give us that, and I'm sure like there'll be meditations and things like that that'll help us grow in that. And to forgive our enemies, right? He like asks us to love to the extreme. I'm reading right now, just to end haven't really gotten too far, but the Passion of Christ, the most sorrowful Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ by Saint Anne Catherine Emmerich. So that's the book that was the Passion of Christ by Mel Gibson, was based on the Book of John and those private revelations by her. She's a saint, right? And there's just so much that to the Passion that you like would have never known, like just like how he loved us to the extreme. When he was, already arrested, when he was taken, like it shows it in the Passion, right? But he had like this collar on, like he was just dragged around like a dog for you. Right? And so like when something happens to us, or like there's like a, like look to Christ in those moments, and like that can be like the fire that can burn under your heart to help you to love like as he loves, like to look at Christ and to meditate in the Passion. So let's go for it. So we're going to do that in this Holy Week, so that we may reach our end and the plenitude of who we're called to be saints.
Okay, so that doesn't work. I'm out of here. So now we're going to go to our team meetings, which will be from now on, and then so I'll explain what we're going to do. I'm